They served our country, confronted America's enemies, sacrificed their lives for our freedom. These men and women deserve America's gratitude and support, but in many ways, the nation is falling short. The U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs is leaving many of our veterans without proper health care and benefits. This is WBTV Investigates, Failing Our Veterans.
Good evening and thanks for joining us tonight. I'm Jamie Bowl. Is America doing enough to help our local heroes? Many of them will tell you the answer is no. Since 2016, WBTV's investigative team has uncovered a long list of failures at the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs. And tonight we're recounting some of the problems within the system. A system designed to care solely for those who have dedicated their lives to serving and protecting Americans. Let's take a moment to talk about the mission of the Department of Veterans Affairs. The agency's duties include meeting the health care needs of those who served, also assisting with educational and vocational opportunities, as well as providing home loans and burial services for veterans and their families. But some local vets say they have been left without access to health care and benefits they're not only entitled to, but they desperately need. And sadly, as a result, some veterans have died. And they did so without accountability inside the department until we started digging for answers. WBTV's investigative reporter Nick Oxner and producer Corey Schmidt have been exposing problems with the VA for more than a year now. And it's that story of loss where we begin tonight. A grieving widow doesn't want another family to suffer like she has. Jason Powell died unexpectedly at the Asheville VA Medical Center in September 2016, just weeks after he retired from active duty in the Army. Even the VA doctor in charge of her husband's care admitted there was a medical error.
I sat my kids down and I told them something had happened with Dad. We weren't sure what it was, but I needed you to come with me to the hospital.
Jennifer Powell's reliving the most painful moments of a memory she wishes never happened.
And there was a handful of people in the room trying to revive him. And I just walked in, I ran in the room and started hollering his name and begging him to wake up.
The day her husband, Sergeant First Class Jason Powell, died. The 40-year-old had spent a career in the Army. He was a committed, decorated soldier and also a dedicated father.
This is actually at Yosemite.
Powell officially retired from the Army September 1st. He and his family moved from California to Asheville. Days after they showed up at their new house, though, he wasn't feeling well. He thought he had the flu.
When you took your husband to the VA hospital in Asheville, did you expect him to die?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. We thought he had the flu. He had been running fever and cough for days.
But he didn't have the flu. Doctors found he had a small tear in a bowel. He was admitted to the hospital to treat an infection. Things were going fine, Jennifer Powell says, until she showed up at the hospital one night and got bad news from a doctor.
She bowed her head down and then she looked at me and she said, "Miss Powell, I'm sorry to say, but there's been an issue with your husband. He's in ICU."
Once medical staff discovered that Jason Powell had stopped breathing, he was rushed up here to the ICU. It was there that he later died, and also there where Jennifer Powell was told her husband had been administered the wrong dose of medicine.
He said, "Miss Powell, I have to tell you, morally and ethically, I need you to know that there was an error in your husband's care. There was a medication error, not just once, but twice."
So what he said was your husband's death could have been prevented.
Yes. Yes.
Jason Powell was given an overdose of a powerful narcotic not once, but twice. Dr. Carl Bazemore disclosed the error to Jennifer Powell minutes after her husband died. He later testified as part of a medical malpractice lawsuit brought by Powell against the VA that staff at the hospital did make a medication error. But the VA continues to claim that isn't what killed the otherwise healthy 40-year-old who recently retired from the Army.
Has the VA ever taken responsibility for what happened to your husband?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not.
The VA agreed to settle Powell's case out of court, one of more than 2,000 medical malpractice cases settled by the VA in the past 5 years. Government records show the agency has paid more than $500 million in medical malpractice claims since 2012.
What goes through my mind is how many families before me and how many families after me.
Do you think this could happen again?
I absolutely think this could happen again.
Despite previously acknowledging the medication error both in and out of court, a spokesman for the Asheville VA Medical Center didn't mention it in a statement provided to WBTV in response to our request for an interview. Instead, that statement said in part, quote, "We take concerns about care seriously and in some cases conduct internal reviews to ensure we provide the highest quality of care and identify opportunities for improvement. Our goal is to always do right by our veterans."
The people that go in those doors provide so much for all of us, and their attention to detail and taking care of those men and women need to be their first priority every second of every day.
Our investigative team isn't alone in holding the VA accountable. In fact, the VA Office of Inspector General released a report in October 2016 detailing issues at the Salisbury VA Medical Center. The investigation took place over a 2-year period and found employees manipulating wait time data. But the director of the Salisbury VA was slow to answer our questions.
Salisbury VA Director Kay Green didn't want to answer our questions the day after a watchdog report was released last fall that found her staff manipulated veteran wait times in order to get better performance reviews.
You're not going to explain to veterans why, ma'am, you're not going to explain to veterans?
Excuse me, no.
The VA Inspector General found employees were fluffing the wait time data at the direction of supervisors. A day after refusing to offer an explanation for why her staff was making veterans wait longer for appointments to pad their performance reviews, Green held a press conference and said the employees directly responsible for fluffing the numbers are either no longer employed at the VA or no longer in supervisory positions.
What is most important to me is that we provide veterans with the very best care we possibly can.
Green also responded to a second watchdog report that found a backlog of up to 3,000 appointments in Salisbury's radiology department. She said she and staff have made changes necessary to get that backlog down to about 200 that, at the time, were past due.
It's very troubling to me that this report, which is 2.5 years old now, both of these reports, would shake the confidence that our veterans have in us.
Green said her facility has made major improvements over the past 2 years and pushed back on questions of whether she received any performance pay while employees were manipulating numbers. The same numbers that were one of a dozen criteria used to decide 50% of her performance review in 2014.
I'm going to tell you, I haven't had one bonus or performance award since I've been here.
Is it not true that your performance plan, you were evaluated using these numbers that were fluffed or manipulated?
That was one, the wait times were one of about 102 metrics that I was evaluated on.
Disability claims proved to be a tough fight for one local Army veteran. We found him waiting years for the VA to approve his claim after suffering a brain injury.
That's me.
It's been quite some time since Maurice Moore stood in a ring ready for a fight.
Here's Michael Spinks. That was at Fort Bragg.
Moore was a boxer who went to bases around the country, even across the world, staging fights and teaching children as part of the Army's PR effort.
These seem like real good memories for you.
Oh, yes. Good memories. It was very good memories. I loved it.
He remembers the time, decades past, like it was yesterday. It's the present that's blurry.
The older I get, the worse it gets, you know? I forget my son's name. I do. That's bad.
Moore is suffering from a brain injury that's getting worse every day.
You have to look at all the pills they give us.
Consequences of those years spent taking blows to the head.
It was part of your job as a soldier to go box.
Sure, that was my job.
To go out there and take blows to the head.
Take blows to the head and make our unit look good and make the Americans look good.
Moore's name's included on this list in a New York Times article from 1987 of boxers banned from fighting in New Jersey for fear that any more blows to the head would mean grave medical consequences.
I get upset easy now, which I didn't before. Now it's like a time bomb.
Since Moore's injury is connected to his job in the Army, he put in for VA disability benefits way back in 2009. It's been nearly a decade since his first application, but the benefits have yet to be approved. Instead, Moore's faced round after round in his fight.
Every time there's always something.
The last action in the case came more than a year ago, when the Board of Veterans' Appeals sent Moore's case back to a local review board. It was supposed to be expedited, but more is still waiting.
It destroyed my life. I have no life, none. I worked my butt off for the military doing all this stuff, and now I figure, well, you know, they're gonna help me. They give me nothing but grief.
Days after we called the VA to ask why it's taken years to approve Moore's benefits, the agency approved his claim and backdated his benefits all the way to 2009.
My kid, I want to see him graduate from school. I want to see him with grandchildren, and I want to make sure that I can remember all that stuff, you know.
Seems like a simple request, right? Nick Oxner joins us now, and such important work that you and Corey Schmidt, producer photographer, have done over the past few months. We're watching some of these stories, anecdotal stories to be sure, but it really does highlight this is a systematic problem with the entire system.
Yeah, it absolutely is. And all the stories we talked about really span the range from VA health services, from the veterans benefits. No matter what kind of VA care or benefit we're talking about, we found problems with that part of the VA.
And it's interesting, too, because anyone who knows veterans, who have talked to veterans, to get them to talk about their service is often difficult. They don't like to do that. They're not whiners and complainers by nature. But clearly they feel something needs to be said because they're missing out on what they've earned.
Yeah, I think this is a group of people who are very proud of what they've done, but they're not quick to ask for help. And the fact that they've had to ask us for help because they're just at their wits' end really says a lot about the problems that they've experienced.
And behind the curtain a little bit, you have a phone line. You take tips on these, and it has rang off the hook on these topics.
Every month. That's why we keep doing the stories.
Really important stuff. Nick Oxner, he's going to be with us obviously throughout this evening, highlighting his reports that you can also see, not only these, but others he has done over time on WBTV.com. Coming up next, problems with the VA Choice Program. It was created to give veterans access to care faster, but it's proving to be a slow process. And the bonus money executives are making for administering that choice program. You're watching WBTV Investigates, Failing Our Veterans. It was news that created unanimous outrage. Ridiculous wait times veterans face to simply see a doctor at the VA. That outrage brought a promised solution called VA Choice, a program meant to speed up access to care. But is it working? We started asking questions after hearing from veterans who said they waited months or even years for treatment.
2 months. That's exactly how long it took Todd Hildebrand to see a specialist for the mounting fluid and increasing pressure on the back of his eye.
I'm thinking is it getting so bad that I'm going to lose the eyesight in my eye before I get to the ophthalmologist?
Hildebrand was supposed to have seen a doctor much sooner. In late October, his eye doctor at a VA clinic in Hickory said he needed to see a specialist. But since a VA specialist couldn't get him in until January, he qualified for the Choice Program.
It just seemed like the Choice Program is not working any better than the VA does itself.
The VA Choice Program uses VA money to pay private medical providers to see veterans who need specialty care.
The very next day, October 30th, they got a hold of me right, bam, that quick. I was like, hey, this is going to be a pretty easy way to slide this time, you know?
Well, what seemed like a process that'd be lightning fast quickly came to a halt. Hildebrand's medical records show the VA didn't actually send his information to the private company that administers the Choice Program until November 25th, nearly a month later.
How long did it take you from the time you were told you qualified for Choice to actually see the specialist you needed to see?
60 days. Exactly, 60 days.
I had to complain loudly. I had to call my congressman. I had to shout from the rooftops that I was being flat out ignored.
Veteran Jim Bancroft waited a year and a half before he was even referred to the Choice Program.
That's not health care. That is a complete neglect.
What is your message to the leadership of the VA?
Retire, resign, or be thrown out. You are not leading an organization that is showing any positive concern for the veterans you're supposed to be serving.
Do you think the program works?
No. No. It's another incompetent bureaucracy.
Now, after North Carolina Senator Richard Burr heard that story, he addressed the Senate Veterans Affairs Committee in support of legislation aimed at improving the VA Choice Program.
As recently as last month, Charlotte WBTV reported that a veteran named Jim Bancroft had waited more than a year to receive a referral from the VA to see a spine specialist. This is just one example of thousands and why I introduced the Veterans Choice Improvement Act. We must fix this, and we must get it right for our veterans.
President Donald Trump signed that legislation in April. It extends and improves the VA Choice program and opens up access to private medical care. Now, doctors are also struggling to work, though, within the VA Choice program. Local doctors' offices say they are frustrated with HealthNet. That's the private company contracted by the VA to administer the program.
We start checking a week or two before the appointment. They would either tell us it hadn't been authorized or they would tell us it had been faxed, but we didn't have it. Had to cancel several appointments for the same patient.
Very frustrating. Jarrett said HealthNet was losing paperwork authorizing medical procedures that is required before the patients can actually be treated. And here are some real-life impacts to all this. An authorization delay left a Statesville veteran more injured than he was before his surgery. Brian Cooper says he had to wait 3 months to start rehab treatments through the VA Choice program.
I'd call the doctor and say, okay, what can I do at home? Tell me something. And he was absolutely outraged.
Doctors say they have to beg the VA to speed up the process. Cooper has now lost permanent use of his shoulder because of the delay. Then came March 2017. An explosive report from the VA's watchdog put new pressure on the embattled agency to improve the care it provides veterans. The VA Inspector General found veterans in North Carolina and Virginia are waiting an average of 84 days before seeing a doctor through the Choice program. The report attributes the wait to an overloaded VA staff who can't process veterans' claims fast enough. Congressman Robert Pittenger says the report confirms problems they've known about for years.
Well, we should have already had a wake-up call, but this again just provides greater data to support what many of us have seen.
The report also found staff at VA facilities are making it seem as though veterans are waiting less time than they actually are. The investigation concluded in 2016 and covers a period dating back to 2014. Our investigations also found healthcare executives pulling in big money to run the VA Choice program. Jay Gellert, the CEO of HealthNet, hauled in more than $14 million in 2015. That includes more than $3 million in bonus money. This came even as doctors' offices said they could no longer accept VA Choice patients. Coming up, we turn our attention to the VA's future. This is WBTV Investigates, Failing Our Veterans. After years of damaging headlines and embarrassing treatment of our veterans, the new VA secretary says he will honor the commitment to fix the department. Dr. David Shulkin says in order to get veterans the care they need, the VA has to work more closely with the private sector.
We're looking for a system that takes the best of what VA has to offer, which is tremendous services for veterans, but also supplement it with what the VA is not doing and use the private sector. So it's an integrated approach to care.
North Carolina Congressman Richard Hudson, who represents District 8, says he and other members of Congress are also working to help area veterans.
Part of it is you got to break the back of a bureaucracy which is focused on self-preservation. But the bureaucracy at the VA, particularly in Washington, has gotten so big that veterans are just a number, and a lot of times they get lost in the shuffle.
Hudson says he plans to fight for local veterans until they get the care that was promised. And Nick Ochsner back with us here this evening. He's done so much of this terrific reporting on all this. You know, every administration promises to make changes. Do these veterans just feel like political footballs now?
Well, I think veterans are actually hopeful every time that a new leader of the VA, a new president gets elected, that there will actually be some real change. I think every time, though, really, it's that they're hopeful and then they're disappointed again. So maybe this time will be the time.
Well, and it's obviously a hyper-political environment in which we live in right now. But this seems like should be something that should find bipartisan support. Can they actually get something done?
I think largely there is bipartisan agreement. I think there might be some disagreement on how those policies work, but I think we're seeing legislators coming together.
Nick Ochsner, terrific work on this special and your reporting. He will continue to follow it very closely. I'm Jamie Bull. We appreciate you being here tonight for this WBTV Investigate special. Have a great night.